Welcome back inside the Now Morning Show. It's time for your spotlight, just about 16 minutes after 6 o'clock. Singing Sandra told us that nobody, and she said nobody, when you really think of it, nobody wins in a war. And we see one that's brewing right now across in the East. And this morning I want to welcome Her Excellency Uta Koenig here with us, German ambassador, to discuss the German perspective when it comes to the Ukraine-Russia crisis happening across the world right now. Good morning to you, Ambassador.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And welcome to the Now Morning Show. I'm curious as to what is Germany's position regarding the Ukraine-Russia crisis at the moment?
Well, Germany, like all the world and also the people in Trinidad, is watching in awe as this war unfolds in the heart of Europe. It's day 14 now, and Germany and Trinidad, we have been on the forefront also of condemning this act of aggression. Putin has started a war against the people of Ukraine, and we are all impressed by their courage and bravery. In the early days, Germany had not expected that they could hold out for so long. Germany has changed its position with regarding to supplying arms to the Ukraine people, and we have also taken a decision very quickly to stop an oil pipeline project we are having with Russia. As part of the EU, Germany has introduced the toughest sanctions ever, and as a milestone change, we will also be changing our budget for the strengthening of our own army.
Yeah.
The sanctions Germany and the EU and the US and the UK imposed is targeting against Russia, against individuals, against banks, against the central banks.
When you guys started the sanctions, and you said you halted the approval on it was the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline,
yes.
Yeah? What impact did that have on Russia, if any at all?
Well, the pipeline Nord Stream 2 is a new project, so it has never even transported one cubic meter of gas so far.
So it's just delaying production
it was a project to start in the future. But you know, the US introduced further sanctions yesterday, and also the EU today put more people on the list and introduced a sanction against Belarus as an ally of Russia. But Germany is heavily depending on energy by Russia. So at the current state, we are still importing oil and gas and coal by Russia, and we are very saddened by this, but we are having a government that wants to transition to renewable energy, but that's a path for the future, and it's nothing you can change from one day to the next.
Certainly. I know that you said that there was increased military spending to strengthen the German security.
Yes.
And I know that you guys also sent some military assistance by way of not personnel, but equipment to Ukraine to assist in their fight as well.
Yes. That has been a change of policy of my government as well. We are helping Ukraine. They have a right to self-defense. Russia has started a war of aggression, and the UN Charter is violated, international law is violated, so all countries can supply arms for self-defense. Germany is part of NATO, but we made clear as a NATO allies that NATO would not get involved in the fighting, because we are all concerned that this might lead to a huge-scale escalation of the war.
Now, Ambassador, I think what we're also seeing with the Russian-Ukraine crisis, we're seeing a lot of people fleeing the border, right? And some people are obviously migrating, or they're coming into Germany. What is the impact is this having on the country? Is Germany ready to accept all the migrants that may be coming in at this point?
This is the hugest refugee crisis in Europe since World War II, since the end of the war in 1945. So within 14 days, we've had over 2 million Ukrainians who have left their country. The majority are women, children, elderly people. Men between 18 and 60 are not allowed to leave the country. They have to fight. They are called as reservists. So Germany and the EU, we have prepared for this. Currently, the majority of people is still fleeing to Poland because they are the neighboring country. It's the closest way to the border. Others are going to Romania, to Hungary. And from there, many are continuing to all the other EU member states. In the EU, we have taken a decision, all the ministers of interior, that we will evoke a special mechanism We used that mechanism also during the war in ex-Yugoslavia in the 90s to give refugees a temporary status that will enable them to work. They will get social security, they will get health care. So the towns in Germany are all preparing for this, and we see that, for example, in Berlin, the town where I lived in, you have daily arriving trains with thousands of refugees, and the process will be less bureaucratic, but of course you have to fill out some forms. But we see a huge wave of solidarity and people donating, trying to help. They are offering shelter, offering beds. They have created websites saying give a bed to a Ukrainian family. And it's a very, very impressive side of solidarity, yes.
What makes this...
And we don't know when it will end, because nobody knows how long the war will continue, and US intelligence says it might get dirtier and even worse in the future.
Yeah. What about like people who may have been living in Ukraine but not necessarily nationals of Ukraine that would have to flee? Are they also considered in that refugee status?
My Minister of Interior made clear this is about saving lives, it's not about passports.
All right, that's fair. But what was the difference between, you know, the refugees from Ukraine or refugees from somewhere like Syria that's also been under attack, or places like that? Is there a difference?
It's a very good question, but you know, sometimes solidarity for a close neighbor is bigger, even though our hearts are open for all the refugees in the world. These are people, they are walking over the borders, and we see it's mainly women and children. They are coming with their belongings in plastic bags. Some are even bringing their pets, old ladies. So we also have a lot of Syrian refugees in Germany, and Chancellor Angela Merkel in 2015, she opened the borders for them, but that was also having a small political crisis afterwards, because we also had the feeling that they were not all sheltering from aggression, but that some people also took advantage of the borders and that they were fleeing economic side. But in Ukraine, there's no doubt at all. We see the shelling of civilian houses, of hospitals, and the reports of media people that are currently very courageously still covering the situation on the ground leave no doubt that this is a horrendous war, an invasion in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Ambassador, I was just wondering, in your opinion, what kind of trickle-down effects you think this is going to have on the West? Because, of course, Russia is a big exporter of flour and wheat, and a lot of countries depend on this country for that. So what kind of effect do you think this is going to have on countries like us?
I think the whole world will see the costs of this war of aggression. We'll have disturbances in air transport. There will be effects on the supply chain. Russia and Ukraine are together the two largest wheat producers, and in the way that the President Putin is also making allusions to invoking a nuclear option, this is of course very, very worrisome. And we see that all commodity prices are going up, not just oil and gas, also nickel, and all the shares world down are going down. So this will have a cost, and of course all governments try to ease things for their own population, and this war is targeting the whole world at a point where we are all vulnerable after 2 years of a pandemic, where all people used up their savings to cope with this. So this is another crisis in the 21st century we did not prepare for.
Now, is it important for people? What is the importance of people registering with the Consulate of Germany to be able to make sure that they can be on the right side of things, or what's the importance of it?
All German embassies abroad have like a list for crisis situations, so that you can contact them and send them information. But this is a voluntary request. So we noticed when the pandemic started in the Caribbean, there were of course tourists here, and then when air travel was getting slower, when many countries closed their borders like TT, we had to arrange for repatriation flights to Europe, like several other countries too. So in that case, more Germans registered with the embassy.
Right.
And in Kiev too, my colleagues in Kiev have warned German nationals to leave the country even before the war started.
And did they comply?
Well, this is government advice, and you never can force people to leave that. Many Germans living and working in Ukraine, they had family, they had friends, and I think we were all surprised when the war really started. We did not take Mr. Putin by his words when he was threatening before. So maybe they did not leave on the exact date when the warning was issued, but like all the millions of refugees we see right now, I saw also reports on German media about Germans who made their way and were telling about the queues at the border and how they would pack everything together and leave now.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, is there a diplomatic way out of this? Is there a way that we can see this stopping without any more bloodshed? Is there a way?
This is the hope of all states in the world, and I was in contact also with the TT foreign minister, and we agreed that diplomacy should always seek for solutions. You cannot just condemn wars of aggression and call for ceasefires, but you must also look at ways out. We had 3 rounds of direct talks between Ukraine and Russia, which did not lead to many results, and tomorrow there will be a meeting in Turkey of the foreign ministers under upon the invitation of the Turkish president. My chancellor and the French president and the Chinese president had a phone call yesterday. The Israeli prime minister, Israel has good contacts to both warring parties, went to Moscow on Saturday, and he stopped on his way back in Berlin to inform my chancellor. So a diplomat may never lose the hope that the solution can be found, but it's hard, especially if the fighting does not stop. Normally you agree a ceasefire first and then sit down in earnest at a table. It's very hard to make compromises for the Ukrainians or for the Russian sides when you know that your nationals are fighting and dying.
Ambassador, just to piggyback off of Ruckus's earlier question, I guess the question is, how important is it for the immigrants to register in their consular in Germany?
This registration, that's for Germans abroad. So the refugees now, when they are coming to a town, they are welcome groups, and sometimes they don't register at first because they are visiting family and friends. But even though we have made it's a slim process, as soon as you need some state help, you'll have to fill out a form. And sometimes it's also a question of getting accommodation, getting food supplies, and all this. So this will be done in time. Currently in Germany, we reckon we have about 60,000 registered refugees, but we're sure that there are still more in the country who they were totally exhausted after their ordeal. So when they arrived with friends and family, they had to recover first, and they will take the necessary steps in a few days probably. But of course, as soon as you need some state help, you have to make your stay known to the German authorities. In Europe, we have open borders currently, so there are no big controls if you're passing from Poland to Germany. People can use the train without a ticket, so it's all trying to help things.
You know, Ambassador, I have been watching the situation, and I'm curious. If Putin, God forbid, is to be victorious and get Ukraine the way he would like to, what is to stop him from going to Poland next, or to go into another place and saying that, you know, well, they're too close to me now? Because that's what it seems like. He's threatened by Ukraine because they want to join NATO. So what happens if he were to win? Should the rest of Europe be concerned, more concerned than they are currently?
Well, we are always concerned, but of course the military power by NATO should be a deterrent that would keep Mr. Putin, if he has any senses left, from attacking a NATO member, because the 13 NATO members, we are all agreed that an attack on one of us is an attack of all that will meet with retaliation. We are concerned, we don't want this, and confrontation, a military confrontation between Russia on one side and NATO members on the other. That would be a conflict that would involve 4 atomic powers, Russia, the US, the UK and France, and that would of course be horrendous. So the deterrent has worked in many years of the Cold War before the fall of the Berlin Wall. So NATO is very firm in its belief, and we think this is a red line Mr. Putin will not cross.
All right. Well, Ambassador, I want to thank you so much for joining us this morning and for sharing your position. Any last words before we wrap up?
Well, thank you to Trinidad. You were voting with the rest of the world, with all the democracies. This was a great act of solidarity with the brave Ukrainian people that are fighting for peace and democracy. And we all hope that the good side will win.
We definitely hope that the good side will win. Thank you very much. Her Excellency Uta Konek there, the German ambassador, joining us inside the Now Morning Show. We take a quick break and we come back with more. Stay tuned.